Hello, it's Jim Hutchens for the Jerusalem Connection Spot Report for this week. On Sunday, the Electoral Commission of Egypt announced that the Muslim Brotherhood candidate for president, Mohammed Morsi, would be sworn in actually as president. I would suggest to you that this does not bode well for Egypt. It certainly does not bode well for the Coptic Christians who are there, and I would suggest that we could expect to see a mass exodus on the part of the Coptic Christians. It will not bode well for Jews that are there or for Israel. Israel will have a southern front militarily to deal with once again. But the Muslim Brotherhood's leadership is not the last word with regard to Egypt. I want to read to you God's last word with regard to Egypt. And it's found in Isaiah chapter 19. Isaiah says in chapter 55, he says, I'm going to send forth my word, and it will not return to me empty, but it will accomplish the purpose for which I send it forth. Now keep that in mind as I read from Isaiah chapter 19. And I'm going to read the Lord's name as it's given in Hebrew. It's Yahweh. And whenever you see L-O-R-D in capital letters in the Old Testament, that's Yahweh. That's who I'm referring to when I read from Isaiah chapter 19. Hear the word of the Lord. An oracle concerning Egypt. See, Yahweh rides on a swift cloud and is coming to Egypt. The idols of Egypt tremble before him. The hearts of the Egyptians melt within them. I will stir up an Egyptian against Egyptian. Brother will fight against brother, neighbor against neighbor, city against city, kingdom against kingdom. The Egyptians will lose heart, and I will bring their plans to nothing. They will consult the idols and the spirits of the dead, the mediums and the spiritists. I will hand the Egyptians over to the power of a cruel master and a fierce king who will rule over them, declares Yahweh Almighty. In verse 16 it continues to say, in that day the Egyptians will be like women. They will shudder with fear at the uplifted hand that Yahweh Almighty raises against them. And the land of Judah will bring terror to the Egyptians. And everyone to whom Judah is mentioned will be terrified because of what Yahweh Almighty is planning against them. In that day 5 cities in Egypt will speak the language of Canaan and swear allegiance to Yahweh Almighty. One of them will be the city of destruction. That's modern-day Heliopolis in southern Egypt. In that day there will be an altar to Yahweh in the heart of Egypt and a monument to Yahweh at its border. It will be a sign and a witness to Yahweh Almighty in the land of Egypt. And when they cry out to Yahweh because of their oppressors, he will send them a savior and a defender. And he will rescue them. And so Yahweh will make himself known to the Egyptians in that day, and they will acknowledge Yahweh. They will worship with sacrifices and grain offerings. They'll make vows to Yahweh, and they'll keep them. Yahweh will strike Egypt with a plague, and he'll strike them and heal them, and they will turn to Yahweh, and he will respond to their pleas, and he'll heal them. In that day, there will be a highway from Egypt to Assyria. The Assyrians will go to Egypt, and the Egyptians will go to Assyria. The Egyptians and the Assyrians will worship together. In that day, Israel will be a third, along with Egypt and Assyria, a blessing in all the earth. And Yahweh Almighty will bless them, saying, blessed be Egypt, my people, Assyria, my handiwork, and Israel, my inheritance. That's God's last word concerning Egypt. The short-term expectations are grim. It's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. But when it gets better, it will be the best because it will have Yahweh's blessing. So until next week, Od Ki Yavo Shiloh, or until Messiah comes, Shalom Aleichem.